Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Trinity-Pawling's Pride Perspective, a conversation with the community. Tonight, we have a great lineup for you. We are going to learn the ins and outs of the New York Rangers organization with GM Jeff Gorton, who's also a parent of Jack Gorton, class of 2021. And alongside here with me here, I have Bob Ferraris, class of 1993, parent of 25, head coach of the varsity hockey team, and Brian Foster, class of 1979, director of athletics. Very excited to host this evening, and we got a whole bunch of questions submitted, so we're going to try our best to get to all those and to get them all answered. And feel free to also use the Q&A down at the bottom to submit your questions as well, and we will do our best to make sure we answer all those. But first, a more formal introduction. I'm going to go around and have Coach Ferraris introduce himself and give a little bit about himself and his hockey background, and we'll move on.
Thanks, Chris. Again, Bob Ferraris, Trinity-Pawling class of 1993. I was fortunate enough to play for Brian Foster for a post-grad year here. Grew up in Falmouth on Cape Cod in Massachusetts and played public high school hockey there, and was looking for a great opportunity to improve as a student athlete before going to college, and chose Trinity-Pawling School, chose to play hockey and golf here. And it was actually quite challenging academically as well. Moved on to college and then played some minor league pro hockey. And then before coming here 5 years ago, I was a Division I assistant for about a dozen years. So it was a great opportunity for me to come back to a place that I felt was very good. Trinity-Pawling was life-changing for me. So
great. Thank you, Bob. Coach Foster.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Brian Foster. I grew up in New Jersey, played hockey in New Jersey, and came to Trinity-Pawling basically for the same reasons as Bob. I was a postgraduate in 1979 and played for Bill Cooper, great coach who was here about 20 years. Went off to UConn and played, and then had a year of coaching at Colby and Princeton, and was lucky enough to come back here and was the head coach here for about 25 years. Coached Bob and some other teachers here, and I've been the athletic director for 20 years, and it's a great place to be, and we're lucky to have Bob here as our coach with Chris and Scott Harf. Thanks for being here.
Great, thanks, Brian. Yeah, and my name is Chris Gilman. I'm class of 2005. I was here for 6 years, so a little bit longer than Bob and Brian, but I love my time here. Came back and started here in 2011, and I teach in the Center for Learning Achievement. I'm the dean of the senior class, and I am the assistant varsity hockey coach. So again, thank you for joining us this evening. Then without further ado, I'll introduce our spotlight here, Jeff Gorton. I'm pleased to introduce. He is entering his 14th season with the New York Rangers and his 6th season as the GM. Jeff served as an assistant GM for 4 seasons and spent 3 seasons as the assistant director of player personnel and 1 season as a professional scout. In the first 2 seasons as general manager, Jeff became the only GM in franchise history to build a team that registered 100 or more points in each of their first 2 seasons in that role. As general manager, Jeff is responsible for all aspects of hockey administration for the team, including matters relating to the hockey's club salary structure and to the team's interaction with the NHL regarding player contracts, player movement, and collective bargaining agreement issues. In addition to overseeing day-to-day work with the hockey operations area, Jeff represents the club in salary arbitration matters, assists in negotiation of player contracts, and coordinates team research projects. Outside of New York Rangers organization, Jeff serves the player selection process for the U.S. national team. Perhaps most importantly, Jeff's role as a Trinity-Pawling parent. Like I said earlier, Jeff's son Jack is a senior for Trinity-Pawling and is a member of our Trinity-Pawling hockey team. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you for the introduction. Thanks, everybody, for having me. I appreciate it. It'd be nice to have some questions. I'm getting out of practice with the media these days and, with COVID. So looking forward to the opportunity tonight to talk a little bit of hockey and TP, which fortunate enough to, like I said, have Jack there and enjoying his time. And as parents, we couldn't be happy with everything going on at TP. So look forward to the night and having a nice conversation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you again for taking some time out to answer questions. So I guess we'll ease you into the conversation here, Jeff. How have you been doing? What are you kind of been up to? I know the off season looks a little bit different this year with how late the season ended last year, but kind of what does your off season period look like?
Yeah, obviously it's a little different, right? We came out of the bubble where we took a beating from Carolina, so we had to lick our wounds and bounce back and lucky enough to get the ping pong ball. So that's sort of changed our world a little bit to get the first pick overall. From there, we jumped into the draft, the rest of the selections and the free agency, and quite frankly, since then we're waiting, right? We're sitting by waiting to see what's next, trying to keep our players engaged. Doing Zoom calls like this, talking to them, and trying to figure out when we're going to play, who's in shape, who needs to come into the country, we'll do all those kind of things. So just trying to get ready. We're waiting like everybody else for word when there's going to be a season. Look for that opportunity, hopefully sometime in January here, and just be ready to go. We feel like we're a team on the cusp of being pretty good. So we want to get on the ice and see what's next.
Great. All right. Before we jump too far into this upcoming season, can you talk a little bit about what bubble life was like and that experience? I know you mentioned, hopefully you wished your stay was there a little bit longer, but what kind of, I guess, how did the NHL handle the whole COVID situation? Obviously, it was pretty successful in terms of getting the teams into the bubble, but what is your take on that whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, everybody probably wishes besides Tampa that it was a little bit longer. But honestly, the NHL did an incredible job. We were, from the moment we got off the plane, we were in a bubble and we were fenced in, pretty much had our walking routes. We had our buses just for our team that was going to take us to practice and to games, and never really left. They took care of all the restaurants, all the food. You never really saw the public. Obviously, it was weird inside of a NHL hockey rink to have no fans. They did a really good job. I noticed watching the games on TV when I got home, they were pumping in the music and making it sound pretty good, and had a little ooh and ahs when there was good saves or nice goals. But in the rink, to have no fans, it was pretty eerie and different. All you could hear is the players swearing at each other, so which is always interesting. But it was good. Listen, the opportunity to go back and play and have NHL hockey and provide that for the fans to see, I think it was better than the alternative. And to have the Stanley Cup winner, Stanley Cup champion like Tampa, I think it's good for hockey not to have a blank mark there for a season. But as far as what we had, our players were taken care of. They had simulators to play golf. They had long ping pong tournaments. They had all kinds of things just for our team, kept them busy. Not a bunch of readers on our team, but weight room. We had a weight room just for them. We had all kinds of things set up for to occupy their time. What it was like in day 70 for some of those guys, I wonder, how crazy they were going. But as the closer you got to the winning, I'm sure they could look the other way and have their eye on the prize.
No, of course. And are there any changes from the past season, kind of from the pandemic, that you think the NHL will keep moving forward, or anything that kind of jumps up at you?
Well, yeah, I think the one that people want is the expanded playoffs, like a play-in series. I don't know if they'll get that, but I know that there's a number of teams pushing for that. Back in there's the original 6, and then it became 4 divisions of essentially 5 teams in each division, and 4 teams were making the playoffs. So now, as a GM or a coach or somebody that would get fired for not making the playoffs, I'm fully supportive of more teams in the playoffs, right? And extend our success. But that would be interesting to have like a 1-game play-in for some of those teams on the bottom to try to get in and give maybe a bye for a few days for some of the teams that are at the top, just to keep more fans in it. You know, it's hard at the trade deadline to have so many teams that are out.
Sure.
So I'd like to see that. As far as everything else, you know, I think the NHL is a terrific game. I think we've seen it at all levels. The amount of skill that is played. You see it at your level. You see it at all kinds of levels. What these kids can do, how fast the game is. I don't think the NHL has ever been more entertaining that way. So I think they'll look to keep building on the stars and keep adding to it, and hopefully some success in New York here to help grow the game.
And building off of that, and you mentioned it earlier, you know, obviously, you know, winning the lottery to get the first overall draft. I mean, what is that? I mean, how impactful is that for the New York Rangers, for the organization? What does that mean to the team and to building around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty accurate statement to say if you look at the Stanley Cup champions over the last 20 years, most of them have been pretty close to not have had first pick overall. They've got a Crosby, they've got a Patrick Kane, they've got an Ovechkin. You know, they've had the access to those type of players. And if you can't get that elite talent, it's very difficult to win. And so we knew that last year, having won the lottery and gone to second, we were excited because we hadn't picked that high in since the 60s, which wasn't really the draft at that time. And then to follow it up and win again, to have the opportunity to have two elite young players that you can control their salaries for a little while and build around those players. You know, I think it's huge. It's like I said, it's very difficult to find high-end skill, and to have to supplement the team and go out and get different kind of players rather than high-end players makes it a little easier for guys like me too.
Sure. And how hard is it, Jeff, to integrate those young guys into a veteran team and kind of, you know, get them to gel pretty quickly and have success on the earlier side?
Yeah, I think that's going to be it's a difficult thing, right? I think that you have established NHL players in the league that are set on their ways, and then they see kids that are 18 years old enter the league, and you know that you're straddling a line of, do we just give these guys ice time and let them play and get the experience? I'm sure you guys have the same conversations when you bring in young players to your team, right? Yeah. You're going to straddle the line of, we're going to live through their mistakes. We're going to let them play through it, which to fans sounds like the thing to do all the time. But sometimes you have to think about the guys in your room and guys that have to earn what they get. There's a lot to be said about that too. So, you know, that's coaching, I think, comes into a lot here of communicating with your players, talking to them about expectations and what we want to do with these young players. But accountability at our level is huge too. And making these guys understand what it's like to be a pro, how to conduct themselves on and on the ice. Those are all things that go into it. And I know, you know, I talked to a number of Ranger fans that are like, hey, you just got to play these guys 25 minutes a game and everything will work itself out. Well, yeah, that's true. And it could, but there is a proper way. You do have to worry about some of the guys in your team, how it evolves and what goes on there. I mean, and these kids, you have to remember they're young. I remember being in Boston when we drafted Joe Thornton, and he still does it today, I think, is he brought video games on the road, and he was rooming with a 40-year-old man, and he's looking around talking to his wife and 4 children, and he's coming into the rink going, you're not going to believe this kid. He's playing video games till 5 a.m, right? He's calling his buddies on the phone, and that's what they care about. Right. This guy just wanted to go for a steak and go to bed and get some sleep away from his family, you know, worry about the game. So it's a whole different world. And like I said earlier, these guys are so gifted coming in the league. It's unlike any other league where you're having an 18-year-old player that can walk in and play in the National Hockey League. You don't see it in the NFL. You're not seeing too many 18-year-old kids show up, you know, catching passes from Tom Brady or something like that. In baseball, I guess we see some young players, but it's pretty unique. I guess basketball is the closest, but have a kid 18 play, you know, U18, U16 hockey, and the next year he's in the NHL. It's crazy, right? So those are the things we're trying to always be alert and break these kids in the right way.
Jeff, would you say that the structure of the game, like having to play in the National Hockey League, having to play a role as a young player, it might not be so much their their talent, as now they have to think with that talent? Do you find that slows them down?
No question. I think that it's like X and O sounds easy, but the transition to play in the NHL and understand the systems and all over the ice. It's not just D zone, it's neutral zone, it's forechecks, it's off the face-offs, it's PKs. There's a little bit of everything in it. If you look at Capo, he's so talented and so gifted. And when we watched him the first few days of practice, we're like, wow, this guy's going to score 30, 40 goals. But then the game started, and you have to understand he's never really had to play in his own end, right? And now, not only has he played in his own end against kids his own age, he's playing against Crosby and Malkin and Ovechkin, right? Ovechkin's teeing up one-timers underneath him, and he's looking, spinning around. Is that my guy? So there's a lot of that, and communication is one of them. And when you're English, you're developing your English language. So we saw huge strides from him from day one to the end. Where we saw him in the bubble, I thought he started to really come on and play well. But boy, it's overwhelming for some of these kids when they realize, wow, this game, there's a lot of attention to detail that goes on day in and day out. And why is the coach yelling at me all the time? Why is it? I never got yelled at before. So there's a whole different world out there when they get to the NHL,
Bob, would you think that similar in the prep school world? I mean, obviously a lesser level, but right, you have kids that come in from so many different hockey backgrounds and hockey teams that when they get here, right, you're trying to integrate them and how they can.
Yeah, I can tell you right now that Chris obviously knows this from us coaching together for all these years, but even Brian, I've expressed that, that level of frustration with Brian coming from the college game, where I think a lot of the guys had already maybe been in a couple different structures, couple different systems where they actually had jobs off face-offs, off D zone, and coming back in their own end, going on a forecheck, whether it was a neutral zone or offensive zone, they get to us, and some of them have not been coached at all. They've just been, all right, throw the pucks out there and let's play. And so it's been a learning experience for me as now a high school coach, coming from college to now high school, coming, maybe not a couple steps down talent wise, because we do have guys here who are obviously fantastically talented, but coming a couple degrees down as far as the progression through the hockey ranks. Yes, absolutely. Like you guys know that when I got here, we were very structure based, because I had come from the college ranks, and I learned from those mistakes. A lot of the boys couldn't grasp the concepts, never mind make them work out there with their games. And it was, Jeff, you might've heard of the old saying, paralysis by analysis, right? Just overthinking. And so, yeah, it's been and now, so what we do is, we now work so for instance, defensive zone, we now work backwards with the D zone. We start teaching the D zone in the offensive zone. So we start teaching, with defensive zone arrivals or returns, rather, or on the forecheck, we start teaching the D zone on the forecheck rather than teaching it straight up. This is what we do in our defensive zone. And so that transition has worked a lot, but, yeah, Chris, it's something that, so the best hockey players in the world, and Jeff, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but the best hockey players in the world, they're in this groove, and they have a feel for the game, where when you watch the best players in the world, you mentioned Ovechkin, you watch him shift by shift. It's very, very businesslike. He doesn't come off his wall. Unless he's on the power play, he's really not exerting a ton of energy unless it's the playoffs. And then, it's almost like shinny hockey for him. He's in that groove. He's in that feel. It's almost like he's using his instincts. And I just think it's very difficult for humans to get, especially a high school kid, to use those instincts when he's being taught, hey, here's your face-off route, which Chris happens to be in charge of face-offs. So, yeah, very much can relate to that.
Ovechkin's a good one because he scores every goal from the same spot, or it seems. and everyone says, how come you can't stop it? And we all yell at, like, I go down and yell at Quinny and say, what are you doing? Like, how many times are you gonna let him score from the same spot? but he's got 800 goals for a reason, right? And the game is very fast. You have to remind yourself. Sometimes people have to remind me that the other team gets paid too, right? So, you start to figure out. But the game happens so fast, and the structure. Some guy, like, listen, if you're gonna get mad at them at TP for never understanding structure the way you want to, you should come watch our practice sometimes. We have the same guys that have been on our team for 10 years, and you shake your head and go, I cannot believe he still doesn't know how to play on the wall. And it's just the way it is. They're gifted, but they're not all gifted to handle X and O's. They're just freelancers. And you just try to get them to the best they can with the other stuff. Sorry about it.
And I would imagine too that the confidence part of like a Capo, he probably scored a zillion goals, before he got to the Rangers. At TP, we get all these kids, whether it was I was coaching or Bob or Bobby Ferraris or Robbie Hutchinson, and these kids, they scored 2 or 3 goals every time they played their youth hockey game. And all of a sudden they come here and their first goal is on February 1st.
Yeah.
And you're constantly telling them, you're going to be okay. You're doing fine. But that's a huge part of, at least at Trinity-Pawling, I'm sure, even with the Rangers, with those young guys.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my son's one of them. He went like the first 10 games without scoring a goal. He's going to kill himself, right? But
yeah.
So you just keep going to the front of the net, I guess.
Yeah, I think you had to buy him a lot of sticks because he kept complaining that it was the wrong stick that he was using.
Yeah.
So, Chris, I don't mean to set you off track with the questions that were entered, but Jeff, you mentioned language, and I don't mean the language that you hear from the players in the bubble when you're listening to it, but actually foreign language. So international players that come in speaking a different language. When you're building a team, one of my favorite teams when I went to Trinity-Pawling in the early 90s, late 80s was the Red Wings, right? I grew up outside Boston, but I really liked what they were doing. And obviously, they had some great Russian players. When you're building a team, do you take that into consideration? I mean, someone coming in that, especially a Finnish player, like Finnish is about as different as, from English as it gets.
Yeah. I mean, the Russians are probably the most difficult because they don't generally learn the English language till they come over. At least in Finland, like Kako was taking English classes and trying, right? But still, I mean, I'm from Boston too, and I speak pretty quickly. Like, you'd have to be looking at imagine David Quinn's talking behind the bench and he's talking, you can't see his lips and you can hardly speak English. Yeah. And he's saying, Capo, you're supposed to be F1. What are you doing? And he's, what did he say? Like, yeah. And then it becomes, why is he mad at me? And there's all that going on that you're trying to deal with. I think the best thing we do, and David does it well, is he puts together a systems tape for everybody in every situation. And then he'll sit down with the player and kind of go through everything as they come into the team. And then you say, hey, listen, this is how we play here. Do you have any questions? And then over time, you start adding to that. Each person's going to have a tape. You have like one systems tape for the entire organization, how we want to play. And then we'll sit down with each player, or the coaches will. And then you build the tape off of that, what he does well. And you're trying to identify what he's not understanding. And we have a few of them, a Filipino, his language is starting to come now. People forget he's been in the league 3 years, but he just turned 21. So you're trying to figure out, Czech's his natural language. You got a guy speaking Czech, trying to understand. Only thing he's learned is on Netflix, right? So you're just trying to teach these kids as much as you can and hope they're getting it, spending time with their teammates so they can pick up the language, their billets, whoever they're spending their time with. So it's all kind of what we're going through as we grow forward. And, it's I'm sure every team on every level has something. You got to, at what point is this guy going to get this? That's when that's when we're going to be good, when these kids can all figure this stuff out.
Speaking of growing forward, can you, you mentioned it earlier a little bit, but can you talk about first how you found out about Trinity-Pawling, your decision to ultimately send Jack here, and then obviously his progression here and how he's evolved as a person and as a player?
Yeah, I mean, being in hockey a long time, I've always known Trinity-Pawling, what it was like, and heard things about it as far as the school academically and hockey-wise. But, more specific to us, I saw you and Coach Bob in the rink a few times, and you had asked about Jack, and we started looking into TP, and everything kind of fit into what we were looking for as far as Jack academically, pushing him a little bit more, and trying to get him on track a little bit better there. And then the hockey, listen, he wants to be a hockey player, but ultimately, we want the academics, and then the hockey looked like it was going to be a good fit for him, just the way you guys approach things. And Jack had a lot of friends that had played over there and were playing there at the time, and nobody had anything bad to say. So it was quite a good fit. And I remember Jack and Cindy, my wife, coming back from that first visit with you guys, watching practice, and Jack's basically, we stopped talking to schools, and he had decided on the way home, like, that's where I want to go. I fit in. I like the coaches. I like the kids. I just had a really good feeling walking around the campus that this is a perfect fit for me. And it was great. A month into school, I remember getting the call, and we felt great about it. He's like, Dad, in a month, I can tell I'm going to have friends for life here. This is a place for me. I'm really happy. And Bob had talked us into not just going the 1 year, because Jack had been to another school, that he thought 2 years would be perfect for Jack. And I think everything that's going on in his life right now, that second year has been key. So it was a great recommendation, and we love it. And, it was great. And it's nice that for us, it's 35 minutes away. So my wife can run up there and do his laundry every day.
Brings him snacks all the time.
Bring lots of snacks.
I'm gonna put Gilly on the spot here. This is not scripted. So Gilly has a huge, hand in Jack's development, because, Chris runs our strength and conditioning. What in particular with Jack have you done, or you've seen, or the work that he's put in the year and some months here that he's been here? Because I've seen it. He has made some seriously significant gains and strides as far as a player, and just talk about his transformation.
No, I think it's mostly on Jack. I mean, I think we were joking about it earlier, but he's that kid that, 10 games in, why I'm not scoring, I'm pissed, and he committed himself to getting better and getting in shape, and he got significantly stronger, I think, in terms of just his overall development. I actually think it's coordinated. We've spoke about this, Bob, right? It's coordinated to his on ice game. And Jeff, I don't know if you've seen him in a game lately, but he uses his now strength, and he uses his fitness level to actually enhance his game, and get to the net and control the puck and defend, ward off players. And it's incredible to see. And, he likes showing off his newly formed quad muscles all the time, but that comes with the territory. But I think it's, he's somebody that bought in and actually has done a great job. And I mean, if you were to say last year in November, he would be a leader in the weight room, that, he is incredible in the weight room with the younger guys and helping and teaching them. So, he, in my mind, embodies everything that we're trying to do from a hockey program, but also from a fitness and strength and conditioning level, for sure.
What are some specific techniques, though, that you use with him, or with the team?
He does a lot of one-legged stuff, a lot of sprinting, a lot of jumping. He was, again, a guy that he's a strong kid. He's always been a strong kid, but he just needed to be that first step, needed to get a little more explosive for him and a little bit quicker. We got him on the track twice a week last year, and I know he put in the work all summer too. He would send videos, and he bought in, and he's one of the guys that was, like I said, was checking in on the other players to make sure they're doing it. But he's on a box jump every day. He was jumping. He was doing log jumps every day. He was a lot of agility and a lot of plyos for him.
Jeff, is he eating right at home?
He's eating better. Like he's in most phases of his life. It's incredible the strides he's made. In all honesty, I don't say it just because I'm on the call. One of the things Gil did with him was the running and the sprinting. I noticed right away his skating last year when you guys picked up on that. You know, I don't want to bore all the people talking about my son, but he'd kill me if I didn't say that he made headmaster's list this year. And you know, like that to me is like that's a huge accomplishment for him. That's huge. That means he wanted to do it. He's setting goals now. He's doing things that we just didn't see, you know, 2 years ago. And we couldn't be prouder. And the hockey's taking care of itself too. Like you guys have preached to him, do these things, and good things will happen. And he's seeing it, right? He's getting calls now. He's had a few visits with schools, so it's exciting. And you know, as a parent, you know, it's good. As a parent, it doesn't matter that I work for the Rangers. He doesn't want to listen to me about hockey at all. So having you guys be able to do what you do and lead him the way you let him, it helps me because it just takes. I could be the mailman for all he cares, right?
And you know, we've talked about seeing a lot of hockey and there's so many different leagues. Jeff, what are your thoughts? I mean, and you've seen so much hockey and so many players. What are your thoughts on the New England Prep School League and what, you know, particularly Founders League, but in general, when you've made it to quite a few games last year, what are your thoughts on the league?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always, you know, I started basically scouting and years ago and always loved watching prep hockey and you know, at one time in Boston it was different kind of hockey, and then prep school hockey took off, and then the Founders League. I really appreciate the level. Like every night you guys are playing tough games, and you look around other leagues, it's like 10-2, 10-1, 8-1, and your games are all great. Like, you know, it's 3-3 games going right to the end, or you guys were entertaining right to the end, always scoring goals late or giving up goals late. But it was fun, and the style of hockey I find really competitive. I really like going to some of the other rinks to see some of these kids and the fans that are into it. And you know, I'm really encouraged by the level of play. Like the kids can really skate, and you know, what separates them sometimes is can they do it at a faster speed? Can they think? You know, and you know, those are the things we're watching. But there's always kids in that league that come out and play D1, and I know TP has a number of kids now being considered for D1. So the level of hockey is fun. I love driving up there to the games, and I love, you know, seeing the TP fans get all excited and watch the kids jump up against the glass. So it's good.
Drives Byron crazy, probably, that they're pushing on the glass.
Yeah. He's got to go fix the glass.
We'll leave that one alone.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about, you know, when you first started out and you were scouting, how did you, I guess, bring you back a little bit, how did you get into the sports management world or, you know, career path, and what, you know, did you ever envision yourself being a GM, or is it coaching and scouting and it kind of went up from there?
Yeah, I mean, that's the path I really was going to set myself up for. I thought was going to be coaching and teaching and athletic directing. I had finished college, and I was substitute teaching for my football coach was the AD, and there was no teaching jobs at all back in, it was like 1990, and there was little to no coach. There was no jobs anywhere for teachers. He told me, if you want to get a leg up on everybody, you got to go back to school for a couple of years and get your master's. And that's the last thing I wanted to do. But he's like, he talked me into it, and God rest his soul. And that's what I did. I went to Springfield for 2 years for sport management. I had no idea what I really wanted to do, but as it evolved, as I was there, I happened to get lucky enough to meet somebody that worked for the Bruins that let me have an internship there. And those, one thing led to another, and just kind of put my head down, and they had a lockout and they hired me. They needed someone else coming back from the lockout. And you know, I got lucky with Mike O'Connell, Harry Sinden, and worked for some great people. And I don't know how it ended up here, but I'm here. And you know, I'm very fortunate. I know that most people in my position are former players at very high levels, and I played through high school, 18 years old. I was going to go to college, play football was more my thing, and I always loved hockey, but I just got a break with the Bruins, and worked for some really good people that taught me great things, and I was willing to do anything for like $16,000, And one thing led to another, and I got another job, and I somehow became assistant GM, which in my hometown I couldn't believe. And then my boss got fired. I was interim GM, and then I thought I was on my way forever. And then they hired somebody else instead of me. And 10 years later, it took me to be GM. But fortunate, it's with the Rangers, and I love the Rangers and everything that they represent, and the city, and everything goes along with it. And it's been a great ride, and it's hard to believe it's been almost 30 years in hockey. But I have kids call me all the time that are coming out and interning, and talk to them and try to give them advice. And the one thing I tell everybody is, listen, be willing to do anything. Don't show up at 10 o'clock when the boss is there at 8. We get a lot of that. It's crazy that some of these kids that come in and they just do whatever they want. Set yourself apart from everybody else, and work hard and show you'll do anything, and eventually a break will come.
What's the biggest challenge about being a GM?
That's a good one. There's a lot of challenges. I mean, none of it's like, listen, I never consider it work, right? I'm working in sports. I'm the general manager. I will say the hardest part is we're in a rebuild, and I've traded several really popular players, and making that phone call, that's a difficult phone call. And I never like that. When you pick up the phone and you call Rick Nash and tell him he traded and he loves the Rangers, or you're calling Henrik Lundqvist, telling him you're buying him out, those aren't comfortable phone calls. And those are ones where you pick up the phone and you're like, I'll do it later. Or, you're trying to, get yourself motivated to make those calls. But, I guess I put my head on the pillow at night thinking if it wasn't me, it'd be somebody else making that call. And, we're trying to do what we can to make ourselves a competitor and a winner. And, but that's probably the hardest part. Starting out in the business, I traveled a lot, when the kids were really, really young. So that was difficult, but nothing's compared to what some other people have to deal with. I'm pretty lucky.
Is there anything that you do in your role now or in your past roles? Because I'm sure it's kind of leaned down, I'm guessing, more towards, you having, I'm guessing, working with the Rangers, you've got really good resources. But before or even now, is there anything now that like anyone watching would be like, he really does that? Like, is there anything that you do as a GM that we wouldn't, for instance, we at prep schools have Brian has wore 50 hats. Yeah. as a person that coaches and is an administrator and teaches and all these different roles. When I was a Division I college coach, I can remember one of my assistants, he wasn't complaining, but he was talking to an assistant from Dartmouth about something that he had to do while we were working. And the assistant from Dartmouth, who happens to be an NHL scout now, was like, yeah, that's the job. Like, that's the job. Is there anything that you do as a GM of the Rangers, or maybe even in the past job with the Bruins that people will be like, really? Is there anything like that? Well,
now I guess the one now that I do that most GMs don't do, and people always ask me, who does your cap? Well, I do the cap because I always did it. Wherever I was the cap guy. So that was my thing, and I like to do it. So everyone calls me. Like the other day, a general manager from another team who just started is trying to build his staff, and he called me and said, "What do you pay your cap guy?"
Yeah.
And I said to myself, "I'm not telling you what I pay myself, right?" But I do that. But in my past, like I will say, listen, I did anything. When I worked for the Bruins, I did anything. And there was a time like Harry Sinden was the president and general manager and a Hall of Fame guy. And I used to pick him up from the airport. And people would say, "What are you doing? Right. Like you have your master.
There you go.
You're picking this guy up at the airport."
There you go. Yeah.
Are you kidding me? I don't think I can get him to talk to me unless I pick him up at the airport. and I started building a relationship with him, which I have a great one today now. I don't know if I ever would have had it if I didn't keep going to the airport to pick this guy up. So something like that is probably what you're looking for. But
that's what you're talking about, Jeff. Yeah. That's what you're talking about with, so. And I'm a high school coach, right? I'm not the GM of the Rangers, but like you know, in order to, you know, your advice to young, you know, to young people who are looking to move up is be willing to do anything, right?
That's what I try to tell them. I mean, you know that the world's changed, right? Kids are a little bit different. You know, it's laid out a little different for them. But yeah, you try to tell a kid that's, you know, 20, 21 years old and go back to school, do this. What else? You know, show up at 8 o'clock in the morning, work really hard, put your head down. Listen, I need 100 copies of this or what. And they look at you like you're crazy. When am I at the table for the trades? What's going on here? Right. And that's just the world we live in. And you understand that. And, you know, some kids figure it out faster than others and they're more successful. And some others never figure it out. And they're like, still can't believe I'm not doing arbitration for this guy. Right. So it's just the way it is. But yeah.
How much time do you spend on managing the Rangers salary cap issues? Is that,
you know, not as much as you'd think. You know, we can spend a certain amount of money and we can't go over the cap. So I always say to like everybody, it's not that hard. If I go over the cap, you're going to take draft picks away. You're going to find us a ton of money. So, you know, I basically always try to build in a buffer for call-ups and all that stuff. So you'll generally see the Rangers be about $1 million underneath the cap. So now I know how much I have to spend. The hard part is the injuries, the daily up-to-date stuff. The off-season's easy, right? You can go over the cap 10% or whatever it is, which is a lot of money now. But it's the day-to-day grind of it. You get injuries and they keep adding up and adding up. And then there's these little things, bonuses that all these young players they can get. So if they get those and they start hitting you like Fox did and like Lindgren did and some of these guys do, now you start sweating a little bit that if you go over, it's going to come off your stuff for next year. So those are the hard parts. But honestly, I really believe that's like the least hard part of the job. For me, everyone's like the key to being a general manager. Well, for me, it's knowing hockey players, understanding who can play and who can't, and understanding people. Like, right, understand what kind of coach you have to have for your certain team, how you want your teams to play. You know, how do we want to play? Do we want to play a really structured, tight game that's built around defense? Do we want to play a high-flying game? You know, identifying that and the coach that can sell that and teach that, finding good coaches that can teach, always teach, because as much as they're NHL players, they need to be taught. It's unbelievable. Come watch one of our practices. Guys need to be taught all the time. They're very, very gifted, like I said, but they still need teaching and instruction and affirmation and everything that goes along with it. So, you know, that's really the job. I think that the most glamorous part is getting a guy like Panarin. But listen, Panarin wanted to play in New York. I'm not a genius that found Henry Panarin, right? He just, you know, we were lucky. He wanted to come here. We had the money, and it was a good fit. So a lot of it falls in. You get lucky, things fall in your lap. You know, you have to have really good people that work around you and work really hard all the time and care about winning and being good people. And that, you know, I think that's what we're working on, and that's I think what we have. You could probably tell by the way I talk. I love our coach. He was a different choice for a lot of reasons, but I loved his optimism. I loved his positive energy. He's never had a bad day. I love his teaching. I love that he wants to get better and doesn't think he's the smartest guy in every room. You know, things like that. I just, you know, I've become friends with him over time. I trust him. So I think that was the way for us to move forward. Him and I had to have a partnership as we were going to do this. So we'll see how it plays out. There's a long road ahead, but so far we're on a good path.
well, you guys are,
What's interesting
you guys are
about your
friends
staff,
until-
and Brian can talk about your staff actually. You know, it's interesting you mentioned it. So Brian, I mean, you know, as far as the head coach and even Brown, the assistant, like you can interject about their kind of link to the league or TP, right?
Yeah, well, you know, David Quinn played at Kent, and he's always been a big fan of all prep schools, but loved coming to our rink. And Greg Brown, do you know his tie to Trinity-Pawling? His uncle was my coach, Bill Cooper.
Really?
So, yeah, he actually, I think he was born at Trinity-Pawling.
He was born here.
His father
Yeah.
was a teacher here.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I think his brother was born here too, right?
I think both of them were born here. They were somehow there's a relationship with Bill Cooper and, Whitey Benson down in New Haven there.
So if you're friendly with them, that must be your tie into the Giants, right? Right, because Doug married into the Mara family.
That's true.
So, yeah.
He wasn't stupid.
Yeah, no, he's not. No.
Yeah, if you talk about, you just talked about evaluating talent and finding the right fit. What are some of the bigger mistakes, or maybe not the Ranger scouts, but that you see NHL scouts make kind of leading up to the draft, or during the monthly scouting meetings? What are some do's and don'ts of the NHL scouting world?
Yeah, I would say that over time, if you look at guys that haven't panned out, especially first round picks, it usually comes down to the character of the person. That most of the mistakes I've ever been associated with or picked or was a bad pick, I feel like I should have dug more. It was there. You got to see that. And I really believe as a scout, you got to keep going back. You keep learning more and more. But sometimes I believe your first look tells you a lot. That first what's that book, Blink? That first look that you see a player, I believe in my heart it tells you a lot. But you got to keep going back, checking, making sure they're getting better and they're going to do things. But to answer your question, I think it's usually character related, or a lot of times it's overgrown player that's just bigger and stronger than everybody, and he was never going to get better, and we didn't see it. And they were just fully grown and just dominating, and we were like, wow, this guy, look at this guy. But it really wasn't. It was just that he was ahead of everybody physically. Those are the main reasons. I mean, I think character and overdevelopment probably the biggest two.
Do you think that the draft age is too young in perspective? Me personally, I think hockey is a late development sport. I look at other drafts and other major sports leagues, and they're much older.
Yeah, I think we were talking about that the last few days because obviously with the pandemic, scouts aren't able to see everybody right now. And people were suggesting that, well, this might be the year to move the draft back, right, to another year. If nobody can see them, so why have a draft, turn it into a 19-year-old draft? Well, as a general manager, of course, I'd rather, the later they can be, the more you know about them, probably the less mistakes you're going to make, right? You'll have a bigger book. So for sure, you can make that argument. I think legally there's other issues right now, denying people from making a living that if you're, let's say if you're Lafreniere or if you're ready for the NHL and we're denying them a chance, I think there's a lot of that stuff that goes into those discussions. But for sure, if you look, I think I mentioned earlier, if you look at the NFL, guys are getting drafted when they're 22 years old. They come in fully developed and you kind of know what you're getting, right? With us, there's a lot of projection, right? You look at a guy, and it's like you said, you see it now. At one time, we put in a few scouts that were part-time all over Canada, and we wanted them to look at like 14, 15, 16-year-old group and tell us about that group. So when they come for the draft, we had as much information as we can on them. But what we found was it wasn't really telling us a lot because the kids that were dominating, they faded away in a lot of times. And we were missing the other guys that were coming as those late bloomers that really weren't fully developed, right? They were a bigger guy that wasn't quite strong enough to, and 14, 15 is mostly dominated by little kids that can fly. And so we found that wasn't as helpful as we thought it would be. So, listen, the later you can get them and take a picture of them, I don't know if it'll ever change, but yeah, I think you listen, I remember myself as 18 years old, and I like to think that at 19, at 20, at 21, I was better each time, but you never know.
How has the game changed over time since, you mentioned when you started back in Boston, right from there, what are some of the changes that you've seen, throughout your time in Boston, finishing out in Boston, and then now in New York?
Yeah, well, the game itself is incredibly fast. I can't believe how fast it is. And listen, at MSG, I'm on the 10th floor looking down, and I'm looking at guys going, what are you doing? Are you kidding me to make that play? What do you do? How can you make that play? Come on, Kreids. What are you doing? What's this? What are you doing? You go down at the glass and you watch the game, and you can do it at your level too. It's fast. The guys are huge. They're so quick. Even the big guys can fly. And the physical play, there is no room to make plays. The guys that can do it and get 100 points out there with that kind of speed, with no space, it's an incredible thing. So it's night and day from 10th floor up, and to go down, stand by the glass and watch NHL plays. So the size, the speed, the skill, we're seeing kids on YouTube that are doing things. And now, 20 years ago, we saw that kid Wallstrom doing all this stuff, sticking over his head and doing those things on mini one-on-ones. Now, if you go to your practice, I guarantee if I go to TP practice, there's a lot of kids that can do all kinds of things, lacrosse, and like the game's evolved that way, right? Like, the sticks are better. There's a lot of different things that go into that. The skates are better, but the game itself is the same, right? You still have 10 guys out there that are incredibly competitive and physical and do anything to win. So that's there. It's just so fast. And sometimes I think maybe the speed of the game is so fast that the hockey sense might have paid a little bit of a price. If I go to games and you're evaluating talent, a guy that can really make plays and see the ice, to me, sticks out now more than ever because it's so fast.
Try coaching high school hockey.
Yeah.
The teenage brain. The teenage brain after being in class all day.
Yeah.
And then moving that fast, like you spoke about equipment. The equipment, I use it, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe playing with this equipment back in the day. I mean, you can, the sticks are maybe a quarter of the weight and like twice the response. The skates and the way it's just incredible how light they are. There is absolutely no way that the teenage brain, I mean, Brian can attest to this. We used to struggle, keeping up at the speed that I was playing at, back when I was in high school. Fast forward 30 years, these guys, there is no way. It's a select group that's able to keep up with that speed. And I can only imagine. I mean, we have players on our team that are the same age as your top prospects. I can only imagine what that's like at the NHL. It's a great point.
Yeah. Jack will kill me, but he told me you guys were towards the end there in practice. You guys were jumping in there with him, running scrimmages and jumping into it. Yeah. So I said, why don't you tell me about the coaches, what they were like? He goes, Bob's good. He goes, but Bob's always open. If I don't give it to him, he gets mad at me.
I think
yeah. We played a 4-on-4 full ice, and
he said, should I give it to Bob at the point, or should I give Musa a tap in? I don't know. Right?
He's right. But I want your son to share the puck with me. So
it's duly noted.
He's right.
Jeff, we might have that on film. We can send you to. We capture everything. But and we talked a little bit about equipment and we talked about Jack's transformation, but how much players' fitness levels have changed and their habits and sleep. You talk about Joe Thornton playing video games. I mean, is that still a thing, or is there so much emphasis now on sleep and recovery and preparation that is also factored into obviously the change of the game, towards the speed side as opposed to.
Yeah, there's definitely that. These guys I call them CEOs of themselves. So basically every guy in the league is running their own corporation, right? They're making a ton of dough. And, it's not like 20 years ago where when they finished the season, one guy was a golf pro and this guy mowed lawns because they had to supplement their income. These guys don't have to supplement their incomes or the guys or their kids' incomes. They're going to be fine, right? So they do. They're very smart about how they live their lives, about what goes into it. They hire their own skating coaches, their own trainers, anything that will give them an edge nutrition wise. They're not all like that, but there's pretty much 95% of them are dialed in, their fitness levels and everything else that goes along with it. So that's definitely a big change. And listen, if you have a career that, your average career is 3 or 4 years, and you can extend it and become a 10-year player, and the amount of money and your life you could set yourself up for. It only made sense to happen eventually. But yeah, I mean, you see it. I see it at your level. You know, you go outside. I walk in now to a game. I sit in the car until I know that puck's coming down, and then I walk in. You know, you see these kids that the next kids are coming. They're jumping outside. They're getting ready to go warm up and do all this stuff. You know, we never did that. Like, I walked in, you put your bag down, you put your equipment on, you went and played, and then, you know, if you were lucky, you might have snuck a beer in or something after the game. But these guys, they're not doing that. They're smart, and they're very fit, and you know, they have their, listen, a high school player wants to play D1, a D1 player wants to play pro, or a pro wants to be the next level, an all-star. And, you know, everybody wants to do the next thing, and you know, that's essentially what's happening in hockey now, all over sports.
Chris and Brian will tell you, I would not let our guys do so. You know, before a game or a practice, it's called a dynamic warm-up. And for years, I would not allow our team to do a dynamic warm-up. Now I do. And the reason is I didn't believe that the players that we had were capable to have enough mental energy to go into a dynamic warm-up, go get dressed, and actually be ready for a practice mentally. I thought that they didn't have that, you know, that aptitude for hockey to do that. And until they showed that to me, we weren't doing a dynamic, and they all wanted to do it, but I'm like, no, like you, and Brian can attest. I mean, we're going to be old school here. We're going to give you 15 minutes on the ice here at the beginning, but then we're going to start. And that dynamic warm up, it's a team activity, but still there's mental energy going into it. You know, it's like a film session, doing a film session before practice or before a game. And then all of a sudden you get on the ice and it's like, they're all paralyzed out there. You know, so it's interesting because at our end, we have to make decisions. But Brian can attest, like, you know, there was nothing like that, you know, back in the day, Brian, for us. I mean, because that wasn't part of, you know, the normal day to day. And even the nutrition, you know, I think it was Brian, it was up to the individual to make decisions with nutrition as well. And even the strength and conditioning component, it's, you know, I have a 14 and a 16-year-old. I mean, since they've been 11 and 13, they've been asking me to train and to eat right. And I mean, my kids might be a little bit of an exception because I'm a hockey coach, but that's incredible, right? Like when I came to TP, all I ate was milkshakes and pizza. You know, like it's really changed. Jeff, do your guys, do they use technology for that? Like I know a lot of our guys are starting to. Scott Harf, our other assistant, who's great, he uses technology for resting, for working out, all that stuff, you know, to monitor his sleep, to, you know, your players are also have agents. And I know we've spoken about this, but, you know, part of those agents' jobs now is development. And I know you guys have a hand in development of your prospects and your current players, but the agents do as well. I mean, agents will go as far as they have facilities now that you will actually go to an agent's office and it'll be connected to an ice arena. There'll be a locker room, there'll be a weight room, a strength coach, a nutrition coach. How has that evolved? I can only imagine, you know, what
yeah,
your
for
guys.
sure. I mean, our guys are generally, they're wearing sleep watches, or now we give them actually the watches, the Apple watches, and it measures their sleep, and you're doing that, and you're tracking their data. Yeah, you always have one or two guys saying that, you know, we're watching them because we want to know if they're out, you know. So you always have that kind of thing, but no, technology's huge. They're every advantage they can gain, they're trying to gain it now. I mean, we spend a lot of money on analytics and measuring everything off the ice and on the ice, and these guys are into it. And you know, they all once they get the bug, they all nobody wants to be outed in the bottom 5 guys on the list of performing in any category, right? So that's huge. I find is posting and letting everybody know who's number 1, who's number 2, and working out, right? And then the guys that show up out of shape and they're down the bottom, they feel shame, right? So that's one thing we have on them, right? To post that list. So yeah, they all have, like you said, and agents, yes, very active in their careers, and now they're playing the role they think as player development too, right? So what you have as a coach, or I have as a manager now, is what you're telling the player and what you want. You're spending all this time, and you know your player as well as anybody, and we feel like we know our player as well as anybody. But now you have an agent who's got all these other guys, comes to a game, and he's like, you know what you should be doing is, I'd be flying the zone here, I'd be doing this and that. Like, they're getting instruction on how to play from somebody that doesn't see them all the time, because what could help them get better? Like, how do they get to the next level? Like, so it's not necessarily a great thing that you have all these different people advising them on the right way to play. Yeah, I know we have parents on here too. Parents are sometimes just as guilty, right? Like, I believe in, giving your kid up to, if you're going to let them go play somewhere, whether it's prep school or college or at a pro, we don't have to deal with parents, thank God. But, I'm one, I can say that. But, I think there's a point in their lives where these kids are old enough they're either going to get better or not. They're going to become more mature or they're not. But they're never going to become more mature if they have an agent doing everything for them, right? Paying his bills, doing everything, calling back people for him. If you're going to commit to a university, you have your agent call one of the universities and say no. That doesn't seem like a great idea to me. That's going to help you later in life. Yeah. So there's a lot of those things that these guys might go too far sometimes. They can help in a lot of ways. They can make the phone calls to certain people that maybe kids wouldn't want to make. But listen, player development to me is best left to the people that do it for a living, right? The coaches that spend, like, that's what they do for a living. We put a lot of time and effort in coaching. We have player development coaches, but our player development people, they go watch the player. They go talk to the coaches and say, hey, listen, let's talk about the player. Let's get your feedback. And then they try to help that way. In other words, I'm going to help you make your point, like I think I do with Bob, right?
Yeah, anyone watching this, there's I don't know why he does this with us, but there's like an ultimate trust level. Jeff's son Jack has progressed maybe more than anyone else in our program. He's really bought in. That's part of the reason. But his dad, Jeff here, has just been, edify and support. There really hasn't been any, or I wouldn't say much, there hasn't been any hockey talk. So I think that's, there's been college talk, but there's been school talk, but, just trust and letting the people do their work. Cause I think he trusts us that we're authentic. We know what we're doing with Jack. But this reminds me, I hate to put you on the spot, Jeff, for the people who are still watching, you speak about development, and I don't know if this question has been asked, Chris, but when you're looking at a prospect, you're investing an incredible amount of money and resources outside of salary in that prospect, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We, from the moment we take somebody in general, when we're not in a pandemic, we're going to bring them to development camp. We're going to fly them in. We're going to evaluate the player. We're going to put them on the ice. And then we're basically going to send out player development guys to watch them and evaluate and let us know how they're doing. Basically grade them on their skating, their hockey sense, their aptitude, everything that's going on, their life skills. How's that going? You take them to dinner and see, is this guy getting better from months ago? And you're over time, then you're making decisions on whether we're going to sign these players, right? How much better they're getting in all these categories. So we're spending a lot of time, working with their coaches and working with anybody that's around them, the strength and conditioning people, to make sure things are done the right way, to understand how they're training, all that stuff. There's a lot of phone calls. There's a lot of travel to go see them. There's a lot of computer work, analytics. There's a lot of things that go into things. Eventually that decides, listen, our reserve list can only have 50 signed players, right? So if we've drafted all these players, had all these extra picks, we're going to have to decide, do we sign this guy or this guy? Are we going to put the money into this person who's getting better, doing the right things all the time? Or we're going to do this person who, he's a really good player, but how many times are we going to have to tell this guy, you can't go out, you can't talk to people this way, can you not wear your hat on backwards every single time you're in a press conference, right? All those kind of things that we've had, So we had a player we drafted a few years ago, and we drafted the guy 5-6 months ago. Our player development guy at the time was Adam Graves. He went to go see him. He had a Pittsburgh Penguins hat on. who would do such a thing? Do we have to teach this? So, it's crazy. These kids, some of them, the only thing they know is hockey, and that can be problematic, right? And so, we're trying to teach them everything we can. We have some really good people in place that have all played at some level and have a great story to tell. So, that's one thing. That's one thing I look for when we hire people is what kind of story do you have to tell the player, right? What was your hardships? What did you have to go through? What led you into the NHL or almost the NHL, or why didn't you make it? Those kind of stories, I think, help those kids when they sit down. And it's not these kids, you talk about recruiting and all that and who they get as agents. At one time, Bobby Orr, was a big name in the agent. He's still in the business. Now, I don't know how many kids in living rooms you could walk in and they'd say, oh, Bobby Orr, was he good? Right? Like, so you have to have other things that sell your program and make them want to come to the Rangers.
So Jeff, we'll keeping mindful of your time here. We got a little, so I got a few questions here. They're going to be fire questions. So you're going to give me the first thought or the first few sentences that come to your mind, and you can give me a hard pass if you need to pass them.
Okay. How many passes do I get?
It depends. We'll see how you start out here.
All right. My wife's now in the background, so this is because I'm right under the cooker here.
Have you ever thought about writing a book on how to successfully rebuild a franchise in 2 years?
No, absolutely not. I'm never going to write a book. All you do is read Nooks now. That's it.
Well, Jack can read it to you. He's that.
Yeah, he's got all A's. Yeah.
Between your time in Boston and New York, what do you consider to be your best trade?
It's a good one. I'd have to say Zibanejad right now.
Best signing?
It's hard to go against the bread, but Chara was pretty good too. I like that one.
Your best draft selection?
Probably a lot of guys I didn't draft. Yeah, best draft selection. That's a good one. Let me come back to that one. Let me think for that one.
Who's playing goal?
Oh, either Georgiev or Shesterkin.
Perfect. And this one you don't have to answer because this comes from a Washington fan, but down in Flip Collins here. How soon do you think we'll see Zach Jones suiting up for the Rangers?
Did you see his goal the other night against Spencer Knight? Hopefully soon. He's got a high IQ, really competitive kid.
Yeah, but he had a chance. He had a chance to come to TP.
He did?
Yeah.
He's a great kid. It worked out for him, though. We can't really pick on him.
Yeah, it worked out.
Yeah. There's not a lot of kids from Virginia playing in the NHL, but I think if anybody does, it'll be him.
He's doing all right. Retro jersey or standard Ranger jersey?
I love our blue jersey. I love it. And, looking down on the ice, sometimes that jersey, I just like seeing it. But I know for the kids, it's all retro because Jack's been texting me forever. When are you going to wear the retro? When are you going to wear the retro? When are you going to wear the retro? So I'll have to say retro for the kids.
What is the part about Lafreniere's game that you are most excited about watching?
I think anytime someone goes first, we all know the skill, the sense, everything that goes along with the ability. For me, it's this competitive drive that's going to be the combo that's going to help us. I think he's got leadership capabilities. I think he's got the whole package. So I don't want oversell him. I'd rather have him slide and come in under the radar, which is hard to do at number one, but he's got a lot of things going for him.
And last one here. And it's not really a fire question, but it's who determines in the NHL to determine who's the captain of your team? Is that an organizational pick?
Yeah.
Or is that more of a coach's pick?
I would say 20 years ago, that was basically the coach would go to the general manager and say, I want to name this guy the captain. Now it's the general manager sitting down with the president and the coach, and even involving the ownership, saying, this is what we want to do, because it's a big decision. And a lot of people are critical that we don't have a captain. And I saw that on the question list today. But listen, the last thing I want to do is pick somebody as captain and in a year have to change it. So we're evolving as a team, and eventually we're going to get a captain, and it'll be somebody, hopefully it'll be a captain for a long time.
And we got one more question just get texted in here.
I'll go back to the other one too. Draft.
Oh, yeah,
I'll take Patrice Bergeron.
Okay.
Oh,
That's a good one.
Yeah.
wow.
Gilly,
Last question from
Gilly.
Jack.
Wow.
what about Gilly? What about our GM question?
Oh yeah. Trivia. Go ahead, Bri.
Okay.
One other current GM had his son at Trinity-Pawling. Do you know who that is?
One current NHL GM had
Yep.
a son at Trinity-Pawling.
Yep.
Who is Joe Sakic?
There you go.
Got it.
Joe Sakic
done.
came. Joe Sakic came for Parents Weekend and wanted to skate with the kids.
Yeah.
And he went out and played with the kids. And the kids, when they came off the ice, were like, Mr. Foster, he kept score the whole game.
Oh,
I'm like, no kidding.
what an
That guy
incredible-
wins it. He wins at everything.
What an incredible player he was.
Oh, he'd walk around here, and our old headmaster, who didn't really love, he liked sports, but he didn't know much.
Yeah.
We're
He's doing
like
a
one of
great
the
job
top
in
10
Colorado.
players in ever was walking around our campus. It was amazing.
Yeah, pretty special guy. Yep.
And Jack texted and wanted me to ask if he increased his allowance.
This is wrong. Honestly, if I give that kid money, I never get change. And I found the other day in his wallet, he's got way more money than I do.
All your change collected, right?
That's
Well,
it.
Jeff, thank you very much for your time. I know
Thank you, Jeff.
it's very valuable around this time of year, but we appreciate you coming on, and it's a great honor for our community to have you and to host you, and to have the Gortons a part of the Trinity-Pawling family. So thank you very much for your time.
I appreciate that. And now I know, like, I saw my wife down there. Bob put her to work as a recruiter now. She's having business cards made up, and she's recruiting the next TP hockey players, I heard. So we're happy to be in the community, and appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody today, and stay safe, and let's go Rangers.
Very good. Thank you
Right
very
on.
much, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.